Okay, we're going to look at some of this older period stuff, the pre-dynastic Egyptian between 4000 BC and 3150 BC range. We'll go from Naquada 1 to Naquada 2 in most of these pieces. There's only a couple that aren't, and I'll try to point them out, of course. But here's one of the earliest pieces. This is in Cairo Museum, and people have wondered what this is, and it could be the earliest ideographical writing and some type of hieroglyphic precursor situation. I believe always that this has been a zodiac type thing. This is Leo, this is Cancer. Here's two ravens. They have combs, by the way. But I want to note that here we have a plow, here we have a plow, here we have a plow. There's one here. So both the ravens get a plow. Even Horus up here gets a plow. Horus is with an owl below him, which kind of sets an oddity. But this is grown plants. Here's a bushel. Here more like probably date palms or something that are trying to be depicted in there. So these are somewhat of the older or elder zodiacal type symbols. Here's a crane, two people fighting, it seems, or grappling, and then a frog. One wonders what the rest of this palette would be like, and indeed I've always thought that some museum around some places got other pieces of this and nobody just really knows. It does seem to have flaked up at the in-between junction, and it could be why nobody knows why it connects to the other piece. Most of these pieces, like these pallets, are all made out of this one type of obsidian type granite that is a little different or somewhat unique. So here we have Naquada stuff, and you can see a bull trampling here, and this shows you that they already had the bull that comes from Sumerian area and up through the Caucasus Mountain area. And here we have the different city symbols that are here, and the long arms attached out to a rope that's holding on to it. So this is pretty much getting tribal areas together. And what we're going to look at is tribal areas and their different influences on things. A lot of these old tablets just have like a lot of animals onto them, even though there's a dog down here that's already been domesticated. But here's the makeup area that they have. These are strange depictions of giraffes. And these giraffes, by the way, are carnivorous, and they're licking on a goat. So, or maybe an ibex or some type of gazelle. This is the 4-dog palette. It's got 2 dogs going up and down on either side, and then the giraffes in the center and a palm tree. And so kind of unique setting thing. And this doesn't actually have a makeup thing on it, so that makes it more of an oddity. And they did have the ears sticking off the side. This is the handle of one of their ceremonial knives, and indeed the blade part of it seems to be chipped, and it's chipped and churted away, very much like Clovis points are and stuff. You might be able to see the starting of one down here in the bottom and how they look. And this is more ivory that's here, knob for holding on perhaps, but it shows you this Sumerian depiction here of the man holding the 2 lions, and so it's a Sumerian. And so this shows you the other connections that I've been showing all along. And indeed here you can see these boats better in this depiction probably, and these boats that are down here, these Sumerian reed boats, and how they'd come into the area here, right, after floods. This is at Gebel Iraq, and you can find them still at the Louvre Museum on exhibit. Here's an Naquada 2 clay plaster seated woman, and they talk about her. They say that her face is narrow, she has narrow waist, wide hips, and emphasis is on her lower body, and it suggests that she has tattoos that are on here, and they think that either she's tattooed around the ankles or these are actually anklets she's wearing. On her shoulder here she has a hoofed animal, and her eyes are enhanced with malachite green. It's kind of a blue-green color, and it's over time turned to that color. It's something that they used on the walls earlier and then developed a better blue-green color, and I think they kept this as the green but changed its formula somewhat. But she wears red and green necklaces, and so kind of neat. She also has a tattoo on her chin, which has a more of a plus sign built into it, or that X which they've always kind of used for land. Whenever they talk about Kemet, it says Kemet, and then that symbol, it lets you know that it's the land. It's the land that they inhabit that's off the Nile, but at this point they aren't really at the Nile, or running the entire area and pulled into the Nile like they are at later times. Here's an old worn down tablet about 3200 BC, and it shows you the makeup area in this one. It's not quite as fancy, seems to be very worn down. There's quite a few lions on it. Here's a unique piece. It's a black basalt vase with two small pierced handles. It's from Naquada 1, so it's 4000 BC here, and it's got the unique handles on it carved out in the interior. This is made out of black basalt, solid. It's got the vase bottom on it. It's not perfect in uniform. People have noticed it years ago. It's not perfect in uniform, but many have said that it's imperfectly perfect in its building. And it's one of the things I want to point out here again that I always do, is that it seems like their craftsmanship went from better to worse. This one group that was here is doing this incredible craftsmanship. The others are doing mainly pottery, and then I'll show you a third group here in a short amount of time that is doing the same type of thing, but more of a cheaper kind of clay pottery type of thing, And all three of these cultures are coexisting and become one, right? And then there's an upper and a lower. They become one. And then you get the cultural mix that becomes Egyptians out of it. But they're all pretty much the same people. Now, Mediterraneans, they were slightly different than Sumerians, but they come from the same original stock. And so, therefore, they really were kind of pretty much, I guess you'd say, distant cousins. Anyhow, the different styles of pottery show you levels, and also later in the environment you find that certain ones of these people are the leaders, and they're the stoneworkers, and they're all these type of things, like the people that built the pyramids and all the major structures and stuff, and what became the masons of them and things. And a lot of the other portions of culture were really just workers and so on. But some of my favorite pieces here, you can tell that they have the golden lid that are clasped at the top of them, and that has an open gouge out of it, so it really is hollowed out and not just some cylinder cut. The hole over here is a little bit different than the other hole on the other side, and it's always led people to believe that they're freeform cutting each hole, but the same stick that could fit in the left would be on the right. It'd be just a little wobbly, but they must have cut it with two separate things. That's so unique thing is, people have often thought this shows a giant, but this must have been some leader. This was an urn that was left with a funeral in Naquada in about 3500 BC, and this is on the funeral barge. And there are a lot of thoughts about these lines, but I think this just wiggles on the water. Here's the symbol of water. They're on a boat, and this is the wiggles in the distance, kind of like looking at the sunset and the wiggles on the water. And they're showing the people that are here. They're always smaller. They always show the king or whatever to be a big man or important man, so they show him a little bit bigger. For all I know, maybe he was at that time 6'3", and these guys were 5'4". But I would not think that would always be the case. I would think it would be the earlier. But and this is that other style I was talking about, where of course they're the red ochre people. You can use in that color, and indeed it's used through the artistry all the way through the entire dynasty. But it's also used by Minoans and Crete and people that are from all over the Mediterranean and even Greece as being the color of people that are, I guess, tanned and so on, and the males. And so it shows you that some symbology is going on here, and they really only had a few colors that worked fantastic back then. It's almost like a kid's set of tempera paint that you do when you're in, I don't know, kindergarten through 4th grade, that chalk paint that you have to set up. Look at these gigantic pots that they have here. And these are again from Naquada 1, between Naquada 1 and 2. This is a giant urn. This is hard for this man to pick up, I guess, you'd say. And it has handles so multiple people can pick it up. This looks like 3 people carry it almost. How many people would it take to carry this thing? What if it had stuff in it? And how would you stand it up? And where are the stands for these? a lot of questions you have in that. There's another thing about hermetically sealing. You hear about hermetically sealing. They put a lid on this and would seal it, and then they would use cords and wrap it around it, and those cords would hold down the lid and keep it real tight. So here I want to show you a couple of examples of the style that was right there. This is an alabaster quartz jar. Okay, it's small. It was made to hold ointments that are pre-scented, so perfumes. Now this thing here is about a foot tall, and it's the first image of a boat under sail. This is from Naquada too, but they know for a fact this is a boat with a sail onto it. So it's funny how they say they didn't have sails till much, much later. But like in my earlier video not long ago, when I was talking about sails that they already had hooked up to these reed boats, they had these giant pointy tops on them, and I couldn't find that picture, and I told you about it a few times during the video because I was frustrated. Here it is, right here. And you can see these barges they have here that they get onto, and they have these symbolic 2 ziggurat mountain things they get up onto, which are kind of neat. But so you can see there's a clay jar people all the way to these alabaster people. Are these the exact same people? It doesn't seem that they are. Perhaps one is much better of a craftsman than the other. One's a little bit better of an artist than the other. And maybe this is how they come together. Kind of like Italy was a little bit more artistic in one side of it and a little bit more craftsman on the other, and when you put that together you ended up with some real good stuff. So here's some of these symbolic vases. It's going to show you a few of these here, but the lady and the lady with a big head, which is symbolic of like the sun perhaps at this time. The symbology that's here seems odd. And they have this palm tree that's on the boat with them, giving them some shade. And always like this one. It's got a bunch of flamingos walking on it in a procession. So this is got to be gifts probably given from one to the other, and they're symbolically already drawn on. So there's a lot of thought gone into this. Not sure what these symbols are down here at the bottom either too. It's just a bunch of lines and sets. Maybe they were just trying to fill up a spot on there, but they could have done it with 2 more flamingos or another set of wiggly mountains like this. Why did they have to do it in that way? But these are what I'm talking about. And it kind of looks like a peacock, but it doesn't look like a peacock. I don't know. But here's these symbolic ramps, and you see how this one bends left and that one bends right, giving you a perspective of walking up and into it. And I don't know if we're left to believe that they had these little step over ladders that they would have, but in a lot of the other art they're just shown on the ground, and it seems to be some type of 2 symbolic mountains, some symbology they had for that. Here's a big hanging over plume set that they do on these quite a bit, and there it is again. Here it is again with a plume set hanging over it. Here we have some odd depictions of almost Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that are right here, and you can see the tops are thicker, so it's kind of characteristic a little bit, and you can tell they always have a symbology. One thing I always liked here about this, there's only a few of these vases they've got, but they do have a few of them. But you can see this wiggly where you would hold on to it and get a finger grip to it and hold on to it, and that really doesn't make much sense. And I'm sure they broke off easy and this thing fell out of people's hands sometimes. Wasn't considered to be a great design. It wasn't kept till later. Nice lizard right here. And a weird thing here is there's 3 lines, and then it becomes 4 lines, and then it becomes 5 lines. And here we can see they already have giraffes that he apparently has a noose around, but they never did get them domesticated. One of the favorite pieces a lot of people have here is the top hat that's here. This was looked at as it had Kohl in it, the eye makeup that they would put. But these hermetically sealed containers, and they're back from Naquada 1, Naquada 2, and indeed this is from 4000. So what were they using these for? This is a Kohl jar and other ones would contain ointments and things. Here's a neat thing. It can show you how these end plugs, like the ends that are on these, and how those are clasped in gold and then clad around that, and would have a rope running through it and then pulled over the top, done on the other side with a lid on here with some type of probably tar on here sealing this lid. I don't know if they would do this for grains or what things would be inside of these jars. A lot of them they really haven't done extensive testings on. Other ones they find, like this one, had a little bit of coal left in the bottom of it, so they know it was a coal pot. Plus coal sticks to everything. It's like if you had an ink jar, you'd be like, yeah, that was an ink jar. But then you find another jar just like it with no ink whatsoever, like perfectly clean, and either the person cleaned it or it wasn't for ink. Here's one of those handles right here that you see. And you can tell this is an older style, and you can tell this is not of the quality of the people that are making the granite work. You can kind of see that. In fact, the artistry here is not quite as good as the other people's artistry. And here's your third set. This is people they call the Mraishin culture of Naquada. And you can tell this is more of a clay terracotta pot type culture. Things aren't quite as strict. There's if very few handles at all on anything, and it just shows a little bit different style and integrity that they have to their work. But indeed, these were all also pre-dynastic Egyptians. This is from about 3650. You can see the drawing and aspects here that it's really drawn much more easily, like he does a lot of these pots a day, that type of thing, just whipping them out. These incredible jars here. Here's a neat one here too that's made out of volcanic material, and it was also found way down towards Heracleopolis, and so down towards the city of the sun, much more towards the delta than the rest of the Naquada type pieces. But Naquada 1, Naquada 2, and after this culture kind of disappears. This culture seems to somehow go away. They don't do near as much of this. Sure, you see some alabaster work and things, but this ancient stuff. And look at this striped marble that they used and the veins in it. And then once they found the vein, they left the vein thick and made it the handle. And the neat thing is it's even got little finger marks in it to hold on to it, which I always thought was kind of, thoughtful or neat. And the speckled patterns they get out of some of this stuff is just incredibly gorgeous. Very Art Deco period for something that's 4000 BC. Here's some of my favorite pieces that they have out of all these. For this one having its swirls, this one having just checks and clots into it, and then they're still able to make it to this level is incredible. But the swirl pattern on here that looks so painted, it's really a marbling. And if you thought that was incredible, this shoulder jar right here is ghostly. It's got a lacy appearance on it, something that almost would look Japanese. And yet, if you really look at it close, it's actually marbling in that black basalt. And they had found it and used that to make a special jug for somebody back in about 3650 BC. Some of this work and craftsmanship, and then later the craftsmanship of this quality is not shown again. I can't believe that the artistry would go from that to stonework or things. They just kind of, it disappears. It somewhat fades away. See the alabaster vessels on the right. There's still that alabaster work done a lot later, but seemingly less of it. And pieces that are like the one on the right here that have a spout and things on them aren't really seen as much. That's that pepper piecing that would go with that one whole set. Like they almost had sets that worked together. Of course, they may have taken out of the same rock, but this type of consciousness was used way back when, in an era when we're not willing to really give that level of thought or consciousness to a people, that whenever you look at it here, it's got a lot of consciousness. There's been many, many of these found, and people have still not quite figured it out. But the way the arms hang back, it looks like we just hang on something as a pendant or a depiction to hang on something. It would be common for it to do it. People have thought about this for a long time. They've thought those are stars, it's constellations, it's this, it's that. I always believe this was an early depiction of Hathor, and it looks very much like the bull horns, and that they're trying to put stars and attach it to it somewhat. So they've got it bent up, but I can't find where it reaches the constellation. Here's one of those knives that you look at, and this one is Gabel Tarif. It's got the swirled DNA snakes on the left, which is quite unique, and on the right it's pretty much animals, some drawn rather badly. The hippopotamuses that are in there seem to be terrible, but here's something. They have these swirl pots that are always around there, and these swirl things, and people have said, that's Milky Way, it's galaxies, it's this, it's that. I really have a firm belief that that's a water drop in a pond, and the ripples off of it, that means that in this pot is liquid, it's drinkable, and or it's water itself. And you'll see some other ones, and if you think about it, it looks kind of like raindrops hitting on water. But here's a ceremonial spearhead, but the thing at the top shows you a stitching and a lapel work, how you would go through leather, and almost the premature button of the time that they had in the hooking on it. This one shows a Loch Ness Monster at top, but then you realize that the head on the right is really a ostrich, and the rest of the ones below are ostriches too. And the man that looks like he's going after him and catching him has an ostrich head too, like, hey, if I act like an ostrich, I can catch an ostrich. Kind of the old Japanese type ideogram where you want to be the creature. If you're going to catch a tiger, you have to think like a tiger. These type of things are. And of course, people would put on skins and mimic animals and sneak up on them and things. Ceremonial dagger here. 2 ravens, it seems, on it, then birds in a tree, and a dog, it looks like. Quite a unique piece here. This is obsidian torpedo vase. And it's got the gold-clad top on the top of it. Now, this really is intermediate period, third intermediate period, about 900 BC or so, but I had to throw it in here just to show you how fancy this is. And apparently this was also to hold Kohl, for it must have been a queen, somebody extremely important. So there's lots and lots of that face work, and that all leads into the time of Narmer. If you look at the Narmer palette, it's approximately 3100 BC or so. Narmer was a Canaanite, and you can tell that there's groups here that looks like the Libyans, and he tries to get together a group with them. He's got the mace in his hand. He's in that symbolic pose that looks like Orion, and so he's helped unify all these people that range somewhat from these red-headed people, these blonde-haired people, the brown-haired people, and so on. A lot of people have thought that he is the symbolic symbol of Osiris, and that the lower part was the symbolic symbol of Marduk. But I don't follow that to be always a constant necessarily. I'm thinking those are Mesopotamian in the first place. It could be their representation of calling back to here. So Narmer palette's got a lot of symbology on it too. It's got the Hathor at the top of it. And again, Narmer was a Canaanite. Most of them have that makeup symbology in the center of it, and this is skin giraffes, and they're holding the giraffes just so you can do your makeup. Hathor symbols. So even at the beginning here, they already have the cattle from there. And I showed you the plows where they already have those. Here's the mace of Narmer itself, but this is meant to be more symbolic because the mace head's a little bit too big. It's just thought to be something that's more symbolic, more like a giant or a grand sword. And here you can see people that are coming to give homage. A lot of animals that are drawn here around the bottom of it, a staircase leading up in, and so on. There's that original tablet we were looking at before too, or one of the first ones, and it shows a lot of worn downness to it. But then that right there is Horus, and the thing that he's sitting on looks like the Osirion. And here's our last piece of the day here. It's a ivory set, and it's got the makeup chamber in the middle of it. It's got all these people that are all in fights and in weaponry and things. This guy's got a whip, he's got a bow and arrow, he's got a pickaxe, and it just keeps showing him Symbolic over and over again. But looking at the faces here, these are the Sumerian people that are there. And one last oddity, I guess, here's a gazelle, but it's almost drawn with like a camel or a bunny rabbit's body, and it looks like it was made for some other reason. It's got even a hole drilled in it here so it could be held, but whenever you put a string through that, it's a little front heavy, so it wasn't made for that necessarily. And this looks like it was made to fit on something. Perhaps this was a clasp that people had used. Anyhow, just thought I'd show you a lot of this. I hope the voice is figured out a little bit better in this than the last one. Appreciate y'all.